So, everyone, we will kick off with our next round. If I may just ask people to have a seat, because we are about to start, and I apologize for the a little bit delay. I'm really proud, first of all, to announce in this next round table, we will have a huge diversity mix. Two powerful women, they will be on the round table. We're very proud of this. But before actually that, I just would like to draw your attention to the TCP generators actually generating the lights here, and they run on hydrogen. So hydrogen is real, hydrogen is there. Come back to our roundtable, which actually will be moderated from one of the most powerful women in the industry, is Hargrove. She's the CTO of Ceres, and I also would like to point out that she's developed the digital twin for Lewis Hamilton, and we are very proud to have her here today. We have another powerful woman, but I'm sure then that Caroline will introduce her shortly. So thank you very much, and enjoy the roundtable.
I'm conscious people are still walking in and from the previous session, so hopefully they won't be too disruptive, but it's really nice to be here today. We have a panel that no doubt will be very interesting. First of all, it will be Michaela Kendall, Dr. Michaela Kendall, who's co-founder and CEO of Adelan. It's a fuel cell company that's been going for 25 years and a pioneer in the area. And she's also a UK Mission Innovation Hydrogen Champion for the UK, so this is exactly the kind of people we want to hear from. We have Mr. David Watson, who will be online, who is our head of energy transition at Cadent Gas. And we have Markus Knauf, who is team leader of economics and global affairs at the German embassy. So each will talk 10 minutes. After that, we'll do a panel and we'll invite your questions. Michaela, please.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the invitation today. And it's great to see so many people here looking to expand and accelerate the hydrogen economy. So I'm talking today about synchronizing UK fuel cell and hydrogen supply chains. So Adelan is a solid oxide fuel cell business, as mentioned, been going since 1996, 25 years old, a private business. And we supply solid oxide fuel cells. We are a technology business, and we're growing the UK hydrogen and fuel cell economy in the UK. So we're delivering this through scientific innovation, projects, partnership, and now focused on manufacturing, because we see that the hydrogen economy is becoming real. This is now accelerating these products to market. And it's absolutely key, this event today, to attract investment to support that growth, because we do need investment into this area today. It's going to promote hydrogen as a fuel, but also the technologies that are supporting the demand side of hydrogen, which is the fuel cells that use hydrogen and hydrogen-containing fuels, but also the electrolyzers that generate that hydrogen. And the UK has a fantastic history in the area of hydrogen. And today I'm very pleased to announce that we're just releasing this book called History, with the obligatory HY, history, on the history of hydrogen, and also it's a global history, but the importance and significance of the UK in that development of the technologies and also the fuel. And it's really important to reflect, looking back 100 or more years on the history of hydrogen, why it's taken this long to get to this point. In fact, now I think everybody realizes that the hydrogen economy is both essential, but it's also inevitable. And today in this room, you have many of the players that will deliver that. And what's important is that the investment community comes behind those developers and actually supports them to make this real and also develop the hydrogen economy in the UK. So what we have is a very simple product, in fact. We take a green gas We work with Cala, for example, developing bio-LPG and also renewable and e-fuels. We take a green gas and we put it into the solid oxide fuel cell to generate power. And typically in the applications that we've developed, we're generating power for a battery. We're just recharging a battery in various applications. So we're just powering up. But the solid oxide fuel cell also generates heat, and that heat can be used for cooling. So you can use it in refrigeration applications also. So we're just heating up, cooling down, and powering up. And fuel cells are actually the cleanest technology for use in remote applications. So for off-grid electricity generation, fuel cells can't be beaten for reliable power. So in terms of Adelan's background and Adelan's timeline, as I said, we've been working on fuel cells since 1996, developing small systems for remote and off-grid applications, and sometimes in portable and mobile applications, looking at portable power generators that can go onto cars, onto camper vans, go in remote locations, powering small devices that just need a little bit of power occasionally. They can be supported by renewables as well, hybridized, to support the charging of batteries. So solar is an important complementary technology to us. And we enable batteries. It's not hydrogen versus batteries. It's actually, hydrogen is enabling batteries in many, many applications, including vehicles, which is an incredibly important part of the fuel cell story. But most recently, we've seen demand coming from construction. The reason that construction is pulling for these types of devices is they're moving away from diesel. And diesel causes not just the air quality and carbon issues that we see today, but also nuisance. So people's welfare on construction sites is not looked after in the same way when you have a noisy, smelly device operating right next to individuals that are working. So we see a strong pull from construction to replace diesel. So Adelan's invested for 25 years to develop this core technology, and we have these unique fuel cell and hydrogen patents. We build these products, we sell them into early markets. And what we found is that we have to coordinate the supply and demand of both those technologies and the hydrogen fuel and the other fuels, the biofuels, that are complementary to these technologies. We've seen massive recent market growth. There is so much demand, we cannot supply fast enough at this point. And that's the bottleneck. And that's one bottleneck, as I said, that investment is absolutely key to resolving. And it's great to see the UK government acknowledging that and absolutely going for it now. As I said, distributed power grids come in all shapes and sizes. You can see here a couple of the different applications, both in terms of construction, welfare cabins, signage, lighting towers, and it's great to see TCP here today with their hydrogen-powered lighting towers. But it's also cameras. There are so many different applications. If you look at the welfare cabin, that's a garden office, or a parked-up camper van, or a security hut. There are just so many different applications for this system. And just to give you a run through some of the numbers, it's at least 50% cheaper today to run the fuel cell, even against a subsidised red diesel-powered welfare cabin. So just by using those fuels smarter, you reduce the operating costs of these systems. So they're commercial today. And it's even cheaper when the subsidies to red diesel are removed in April 22, at least 75% cheaper. Each kilogram of fuel provides 10 hours of power with the small fuel cell, and it saves over 80% of the carbon when compared to a diesel operation. If you use a bio-LPG, you eliminate 98% of the carbon. And our fuel cell today is not subsidised in any way, and we're pressing for subsidies to increase and encourage the use of these types of systems. I drive a hydrogen car. In Birmingham, we have one hydrogen station, so I'm hoping it's still working. No, it is always working in my experience. However, there needs to be more hydrogen for sure. We work with Toyota to provide short leases so people can try before they buy. They don't need to commit to a long-term lease. they can just try for a few months. And it's a great alternative to battery vehicles. It's got a 400-mile range. And in fact, the new model of the Mirai has an 800-mile range. And it's clean air zone exempt. We have a clean air zone in Birmingham. And this, you can avoid the payment of the toll. In HGVs, we're working on a Department for Transport funded project. I've seen Dennis Hayter from Intelligent Energy. He's also working on this, and John Hunt from Toyota. This is looking at hydrogen-powered HGVs, and the UK is looking at supporting a demonstration project in the Midlands, because hydrogen is the most competitive low-carbon solution, and also it's more competitive than other technologies in this area. There are at least 15 projects around the world that we know of that are developing hydrogen electric trucks, 3 of which are in the UK. So we're working to develop the supply chains. So Adelan in the fuel cell supply chain in the UK is a manufacturer. We're developing our own fuel cell technologies and we have our own IP, but we're also integrating those technologies of those around us and the components of those around us. And we understand the customers and the interfaces with the manufacturers and the end users. So what we're doing, we're working to synchronize the supply of hydrogen fuel and hydrogen technologies, things like fuel cells and electrolyzers, to accelerate into the market. So very simply, fuel cell products reduce costs, they reduce carbon, and they reduce things like nuisance noise. Total no-brainer. This is absolutely essential. They're stackable, they can be portable, and they're Wi-Fi enabled. So it's essential that we move towards that hydrogen economy. And thank you again for the invitation today.
Thank you, Michaela. We're now going to move to David, who's online from Cadent Gas. I hope it's all working, and he's going to show us some slides as well. So I'm over to the desk. Do we have David online? Yes, no? Yeah. David, can you hear us?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, fabulous. Well, over to you, David.
Wonderful. Well, listen, hello, and thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to speak with you all today. It's been a great event. I've been following it online. I'm just sorry I couldn't be there in person. Cadent is the largest gas distribution company in the UK, and we deliver gas to around 11 million homes and businesses across the North West, the West Midlands, East Midlands, South Yorkshire, and through to the east of England, and then down even to North London, keeping people on the network safe and warm. And in doing that, we're responsible for maintaining our network, ensuring that it operates safely, reliably for those that rely on it. We're also helping homes, businesses, and renewable gas suppliers connect to that network as well. And the gas that we're supplying through that network is integral to keep everything going. I love a good Sankey diagram, and I'm not going to apologise too much for putting it up there, but I won't talk to some of the very small text you've got in front of you too much. Just other than to say, like, total UK energy demand today is around 2,000 terawatt hours, and natural gas is meeting about 45% of that. Its big 3 uses, as I'm sure you're aware, are generating the electricity we need to keep the lights on and my Wi-Fi connection going right now, but also in providing nearly 22 million customers across the UK with the heat and hot water they need to keep safe and warm in their homes and businesses. It's also a crucial feedstock for many industrial processes that need high temperature heat. Industries such as steel, chemicals, food production, glass. These are industries that support jobs and economic growth right across the UK. And in doing this, we need to recognise that natural gas is flexible too. Peak heat demand is around 4 times that of electricity today. And if you look at a half-hourly basis, it's several times more than that. But we need to also own the fact that natural gas is no longer part of the solution here in the UK. In fact, it's part of the problem. The impacts of fossil fuel use on the climate isn't just limited to rising temperatures, as you can see on this chart here, but also warming oceans and shrinking ice sheets. Glaciers are in retreat, decreasing snow cover, and sea levels are rising. We're also seeing ocean acidification and more extreme weather events. And this means that we need to stop using fossil fuels like natural gas. The vast majority of carbon emissions and therefore climate change is coming from fossil fuel use, so oil, coal, and yes, natural gas. But as we've been exploring today, there really are clean alternatives to each that are available today. We've got the tech out there, we just need to get it. The problem is it can cost a lot more today, but those costs are falling and they're going to continue to fall, particularly for things like renewable power and, yes, hydrogen. And that's why getting to net zero isn't just necessary, it's also possible. And gas networks, and this is what I want to speak to you about today, gas networks have a crucial role in delivering this, specifically around the delivery of hydrogen, because with no hydrogen, there will be no net zero. Hydrogen is very versatile. It can be produced either as a gas or a liquid and then reused for multiple use cases. And as we've just been hearing actually there, it can be easily stored, produced in one season and then used in another. In a future power system where intermittent renewables account for maybe 80% of the mix, security of supply is going to be key, and therefore there is a role for hydrogen in the power sector. It means we need flexibility, peaking plant to fill in the gaps and ways in which to produce energy and then store it for periods of time when renewable energy isn't producing. 1/3 of the UK's zero carbon dispatchable electricity needs could be supplied by hydrogen in 2050. That's a significant amount. The photo that you've got on the screen there in front of you is of a world's first demonstration project, a fully integrated power to hydrogen to power project at an industrial scale and in a real world power plant application over in France. This technology is being developed into larger plants right now with the aim of replacing the gas peaking plant that we have today with clean alternatives that can back up renewables. In transport, hydrogen's got a real and genuine future, particularly in large, heavy transport, such as lorries, buses, but as well as shipping and some aviation. Biomethane's got a strong and ultimately transitionary role to play in the decarbonisation of heavy transports as a final use product. And we're already working with major logistics and firms and food retailers to help them achieve their own net zero targets for their fleets and their transport equipment. Industry is, of course, the most obvious use case for hydrogen. Many industries need high temperature heat for processes, and it's difficult or expensive to electrify much of this. The photo you've got here is slightly obscure, but this is from Pilkingtons. They've got a manufacturing plant up in the northwest, and they've been manufacturing architectural glass at St Helens using hydrogen power in a world's first trial this year. This trial is a key step in the manufacturer's plans to decarbonise, and it could see a transition to using hydrogen power to produce all the glass at the site. Currently, that's being met by natural gas, contributing to the carbon emissions in the area. But hydrogen is going to be part of the clean energy solution that's going to help Pilkingtons and others in the area decarbonise. And I'll touch on that a little bit more later, because it's not just glass, it's also other sectors such as food, beverages, chemicals. And it's actually this that's going to accelerate the deployment of hydrogen right across the UK, with large clusters of industrial demand likely to go first. Homes and buildings also have a key role. Mike Foster touched on this earlier. It's worth saying, even as a gas network, I'm going to stand here today and say electrification also has a role in providing the heat and hot water for buildings across the UK. But we need to recognise that heat pumps are not going to be suited to every single property. There are also system issues with a high electrification scenario about how do you keep people safe and warm when wind and solar isn't producing. And so we are going to need hydrogen as part of that mix, both for residential properties, but also for commercial properties. The picture you've got here is the hydrogen house, which many of you will be familiar with. This is it's a demonstration house, so no one lives in it, but it's got actual appliances there today. It's connected to a supply of clean hydrogen, and you can go there and you can cook your breakfast on a hydrogen hob, or have a shower, I think, using hot water that's been provided through hydrogen. And this could be a vision of the future home that many of us will come to know in the future. And so whilst the hydrogen sector is still in early days of scaling up, gas networks have got a key role to play in this transition, in enabling all of it. The first thing is the gas networks are investing a lot of money in demonstrating the safety case. All the work that we've done so far shows that hydrogen will be as safe as natural gas is today, and those demonstration projects are continuing. We heard about the demonstration project up at Win Leighton, so progressing now. There's further demonstration projects there so that we can show to people like governments, to stakeholders, the HSE, etc., that it really can be a part of the safe, reliable energy infrastructure that we need. We've also heard a bit about blending and how the role that can play in unlocking future production and future demand, and also delivering a quick and easy reduction in carbon emissions. Gas networks today are demonstrating that through trials such as those at Kiel, such as those up at Wen Leighton, and beyond, about how you do that and creating the legal and the market infrastructure necessary to deliver that. Governments have set out ambitions for village demonstration trials where a gas network such as Cadent will be going to an actual real-world village or town in this decade and converting them all to hydrogen to show what that transition might look like for whole places. We're also investing in industrial clusters that I mentioned. I'm going to touch on that slightly at the end, but suffice to say that there are a number of industrial clusters right across the UK right now where hydrogen production really is scaling up today. And also we're thinking about how you operate a system in this future world. So how hydrogen pipelines are going to be operated and regulated, and using some of our experiences from the industrial clusters as a bit of a guide. Cadent are investing heavily in all of this, as I've already mentioned, and a great example of this can be seen in the HyNet project up in the northwest. This project's going to produce clean hydrogen to replace the fossil fuels that we're using today for industry, transport, and homes. It's going to capture and store the carbon dioxide emissions produced by energy-intensive industries, and then store that out in the Irish Sea. We're in a climate emergency, and we need to act quickly if we're going to reduce our emissions. HyNet's an ambitious and viable answer for how we get there for North West England and the North Wales region. The project's made up of several different elements, including upgrades to existing facilities, as well as the development of brand new infrastructure. And the breadth of the project makes it a real leader in the creation of a UK's hydrogen economy, bringing not just environmental benefits, but also economic benefits to the area. We're going to be reducing carbon by about 10 million tonnes a year by 2030. That's the equivalent to 4 million cars off the road. And it's going to deliver 50% of the UK's hydrogen production target alone. It's got net benefits, economic benefit to the UK of about £31 billion, and it's going to support 6,000 local jobs. And this really matters because the future needs gas, and that gas is hydrogen. So with that, I'll stop and say thank you. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much, David. And now I'm going to hand over to Markus for a German lens on the hydrogen production. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline, and also thanks for all the organization of this event, because for Germany actually hydrogen is key for the energy future, and we see it especially holds especially true for the decarbonization of industrial processes, and we think that hydrogen really has the potential to bring the energy transition to sectors that cannot be easily electrified. So this is why the German government adopted its hydrogen strategy back in 2020, in summer 2020. And it has a strong focus on green hydrogen. It's very broad in a sense, and it's funded by 9 billion euros. So significant funding here, and also with a very broad perspective. And perspective also on international cooperation and developing an international market for hydrogen, but also in developing our home market for hydrogen. As well as establishing it in cooperation with industries and suppliers as a source, as an alternative energy carrier. And as I said, as we have the focus on green hydrogen here, we think it's really crucial to make green hydrogen competitive. Aspect was mentioned before several times, and we really think this is crucial. It's about the cooperation between science and industry, and sort of the government facilitating here in the middle. Probably on the issue of production, and also to give you a bit of an overview where Germany stands. At the moment, Germany is producing 55 terawatt hours of hydrogen, but this is mostly gray hydrogen, and it's mostly for industrial use. So in production processes, chemical industry especially. But where do we see the future? We see in 2030, we project that the demand will rise to about 90 to 110 terawatt hours. So that's approximately doubling. And we see the main use in industry, steel production, chemical industry, where we have some promising projects going on, but also, as was mentioned by David, in the transport sector as well. One, of course, important step for the success of a hydrogen strategy is hydrogen production, as was mentioned. We aim at having about 5 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity in 2030. We're in constant dialogue with the industry and also with the suppliers. There's a stakeholder process in Germany, so that we sort of get all the things right, as we are, as this is really a new technology in so many ways. So probably a bit of our experience is now having been about 1.5 years into our hydrogen strategy. Our cabinet and our ministers looked at the first results that we have. So one positive sign is, I talked about the 5 gigawatt capacity. Actually, industry tells us that they're so keen on the projects and see so much potential there that we could expect probably even about 4 times as much of capacity in 2030. We see a really strong interest of industry in getting involved. We launched these important projects of common European interests in this area, and now so far it's 62 big projects that we have selected and identified, and they will be funded by the government or supported by the government, the federal government, as well as the regional Länder governments with 8 billion euros. Probably one of the examples, what are we actually doing, is one of the projects. It's called Hydrogen Republic Germany. It's funded with 700 million euros. It's mostly a research project with several aspects. One looks into the mass production of electrolyte machinery. So actually what you are also referring to, sort of where do we get the hydrogen from? The other project we are funding is about offshore production of green hydrogen. Also, we see potential here in the North Sea off the German shore, but also on the technologies of hydrogen transport via pipelines or other means. Probably one important difference of how we see it develop in Germany to the UK. As I mentioned, we expect probably up to 110 terawatt hours of demand in 2030. On the other hand, we expect that domestic green hydrogen will be about 14 terawatt hours, so there's a huge gap. So Germany, from our perspective, will remain an energy importer as we are now. So key to our strategy is international cooperation. What we did is we established hydrogen partnerships, for example, with countries in Northern Africa. We're working on this, but of course also within the EU framework. We're keen on technological cooperation. There's a lot going on with Canada and Australia, they've also already mentioned. And what we also think is key, we have to think of these countries that actually supply our carbon-based energy at the moment. So we opened hydrogen offices in Nigeria, for example, and in Saudi Arabia, in Russia, in Ukraine, to sort of see how we can help them probably in the transition, but also sort of that they know what we are actually planning to do as probably one of their key partners. I think it's good that we discuss about this also here in the UK, and really looking forward to the discussion we're going to have. Thank you. Thank you all for the invite. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much for that, Markus. And now we're going to open a discussion on some of these really interesting topics, and I hope that you will chime in with your questions very soon. I'm dying to ask one question, so I'm going to start. Because we've heard, we're on a panel on scalable and sustainable hydrogen production, and we heard from Matt Williamson this morning that we need a low carbon standard for hydrogen production. I'd like to know for you, what does it mean, and how do we ensure that the production of hydrogen is actually of a really low carbon standard? Now, we know we can do green hydrogen, but perhaps, David, you can open up and tell us, how do we all ensure in the supply chain that what we have is actually lower carbon than where we are now?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I think this goes to the heart of everything that we need to be thinking about as we build the hydrogen economy. And part of the reason I think this is important is that hydrogen today, people talk about hydrogen in terms of colours, whether it's blue, green, there's even turquoise, pink, yellow, and there's many other colours out there as well. And I think this gets in the way, actually, of real engagement. I don't really think that consumers care whether it's blue or green. I think whether they care that it's either dirty or clean, to be frank, and that means carbon intensity standards. And so it's necessary for us to develop carbon standards for hydrogen production that are commensurate with a net zero pathway and ensure that all hydrogen that's then used in the UK, and I would argue beyond, meets those carbon standards. Now, for blue, I mean, this is where then the question about what's the future for blue. Blue can absolutely get there. If you look at the carbon intensity for things like blue and hydrogen, it's based on things like where you get the natural gas feedstock, the standards and the regulations that cover the emissions associated with that, and then the capture rates for the associated CCS technology. And so blue can absolutely be part of that future, and we think it absolutely will be part of that future, not least as a transition to a potential green future. But the key is going to be getting the right carbon intensity standards around that.
In Germany, have you got a system? I'm conscious I've got my microphone, otherwise you won't hear me. In Germany, have you got a standard way already on the regulatory process? So is that something that's already established?
As far as I know, we have a preliminary system, I would say, within the European Union. But of course, the problem is sort of, as the technology develops, to look at the whole supply chain and sort of see what is actually the emission level we are looking at. And this sort of will be adapted and will be part of the research that is actually going into this.
And Michaela, what do you think in terms of our ability to be there with regulatory standards at the time that we need it? Because we, as you talked about, it's now. We need to act now.
Yeah, so regulation has to catch up. But everybody's on a steep learning curve, aren't they? So I think it's also important, as well as looking from a high level, that strategic approach, it's also important, and what we've found is looking at those early markets, looking at ground up also, localizing supply chains, localizing economics. There will be different economics in different regions, and there will be different resources in different regions. So So we sort of look at it from that early market perspective and early customers and talking to them. And yeah, I think availability of hydrogen is the key bit, first of all, not necessarily the carbon footprint initially.
So just before I open to the floor, my other burning question is, are we moving quickly enough in the hydrogen production? Michaela.
No, we're not moving quickly enough. I mean, it's so frustrating. We've been doing this for 25 years. I've personally worked in the hydrogen and fuel cells for 30 years. It's not moving fast enough and we have to accelerate it. And I just, there's no excuse. And I think we all have to put in as much effort as possible at this point. It's about international collaboration. It's about regulation. It's about investment. All of these building blocks have to be in place.
David, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, listen, I agree with everything just being said there. We've got a 5 gigawatt by 2030 target here in the UK, and that's fantastic. That's a great first step, but it's not enough. There's more ambition required if we're going to build the hydrogen economy that we're going to need in order to deliver net zero. And I firmly believe that the investment is there and ready to be unlocked if we can show more ambition, if we can remove some of the barriers to that investment, such as the business models that are necessary to bring forward large-scale hydrogen production. I'd also say that there are some things that we can do to encourage that production as well. It's a bit of a chicken and egg question, but by creating some of the early demand, I think we can see some of that investment come on board. So for example, this is why hydrogen blending could be so powerful. If we can secure a decision to blend hydrogen into the natural gas mix today, which FYI, it can just be done without any disruption to consumers, we can unlock that production and really scale up the hydrogen economy much faster than we're on the course to do today.
And from a German perspective, Markus, do you think that you're, having got your strategy a year ago, are you ahead of the UK in this sense?
I would say what we can really build on is that we sort of already got a bit of experience and response from research as well as companies. And we saw, for example, that there's so much interest in industry to get into this technology. So this sort of really gave us a bit of a head start and also a positive impulse, I would say, so that we really see that actually in the dialogue between industry, research and the government, we can sort of find the right way, and already saw that this huge interest probably even is more than we expected in the first place a year ago.
Fabulous. Now, I'd like to open to questions to the floor. I see at least one question there from gentleman at the back, and perhaps if we can do like the previous panel, and if there are 2 questions, we take them at the same time. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Phil Rogers. I'm from the National Nuclear Laboratory here in the UK. I'd be interested in the panel's views on the consideration of nuclear that could provide additional nuclear hydrogen outputs at large scales with high capacity factor that could actually support the sector in accessing additional hydrogen over and above what's currently considered.
Okay, do we have another question before we begin? Yeah, another one here.
We have also a question online as well, probably is to both of you, is how can governments support startups, but as well as businesses to unleash the hydrogen even further, faster?
Arun Srinivasan, Robert Bosch. I'm one of the users and use cases for hydrogen from a mobility perspective. We've got similar conversations in the UK on electrification, on automated driving, and a whole host of other technologies. And I see, being a German company, a slight different approach between the Germans and the way we do it here in the UK. So perhaps a question to my English colleagues here on the panel. What is it that's missing? Why are we not getting there? Obviously, you see the demand. You've been in the industry for a long time. We heard a few lectures this morning about hydrogen being produced in the country. What is preventing us from scaling up? It'd be good to get your views on that. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got a question on nuclear and their role for hydrogen production, government support for startup to make us go faster, and what's missing actually generally for scaling up in the UK. So I don't know, Michaela, do you want to
Yeah,
start us?
I'm happy to address the last question first. In terms of scaling up, which is absolutely critical. So what's missing right now is investment to grow. I think that's clear, and I think this is a really important event to stimulate those conversations, as you said, begin those dialogues between the different sectors, investment communities, the research communities, and the commercial sector. So if we can just have a coordinated approach nationally, that would help. But in fact, what's happened is regionalised at this point, and maybe that is also a strong way. If you look at the Chinese approach, for example, to the hydrogen economy development, then it is both strategic, top level down, but it's also ground up and regionalised, and that would enormously help investment into the regions to support the strengths of those regions, and then top down to coordinate that in terms of management.
Yeah. David, maybe you want to come in on the nuclear question?
Yeah, and I've got a comment on the other two questions, which I sort of see as linked. They're both talking about, if I understand correctly, barriers to the hydrogen economy, which I'll touch on very briefly. On the nuclear question, yeah, I think there is genuine potential here. So, for example, we're building a new nuclear power station at Sizewell. That has the potential to also be producing some hydrogen around that vicinity. And the point around base load is key. So green hydrogen from renewables, potentially using either dedicated renewables or excess renewables, has a genuine future. There will be questions about the extent, the volume you can produce on that, and hydrogen produced on base load from a nuclear power station is one of the answers. I think we need to be honest and say that it's likely to be more expensive than green hydrogen in the long term, and so there will be a question around the use cases that's best directed to, but I firmly believe that's got a future. In terms of the other two questions, which I'm going to group together if that's okay, and talk about but what barriers are there and how can we remove them. I spoke about the need for business models for producers to come forward, so things like contract for difference mechanisms, for example, for hydrogen, which will enable people to know that they're going to get a guaranteed price and sell that into the market. I think that's going to be quite important. I also think creating the right incentives to decarbonise industry, homes, and businesses as well. That's going to be quite important as well, whether that's through standards or pricing mechanisms, for example. And I also think there's something which networks can do as well. I often speak internally about the need for people like organisations like Cadent and other organisations to stop planning in silos. Today in the UK, gas networks will go off and plan for what's happening on their network over here, and an electricity network will go off and plan what's needed for their network over there. I think instead we need to move in the UK to a much more whole systems thinking approach, where we think about what's required in order to get to net zero, and especially given how hydrogen can play a role in lots of different vectors, how we enable that to happen in the gas network, the power network, and across all different sectors.
Thank you. And Markus, you told us about a 9 billion investment in 9 billion euros in hydrogen in Germany. That's a lot more than in the UK. That's been pledged. How is that applying to the industry, and who's benefiting, and are some of the startups also benefiting from that?
Yeah, that's the idea, that we have the dialogue with the established industries. That's important for scaling up in our opinion. Also, this international strategy that I talked about, as we sort of identified that we will be an energy importer, that we sort of kickstart this development also in probably countries that didn't up to now think of them as a hydrogen producer. That's an important point for us, but also the focus on research and research projects. That's more for the startups as well, as we're fully aware that this is a moving target, and we can't say now for sure what this hydrogen production and hydrogen world will look like in 20 years. So this is sort of the strategy sort of pans out as well as for startups, as well as for scaling up and large scale production.
Can I come back on something here, if that's okay?
Yes, please.
So, I mean, I think also we need to sort of say, well, what's the so what? Why are we looking to remove barriers? And we've just heard, like firsthand, just the scale of ambition that Germany has and the amount of investment that's going on over there. There's a real opportunity here for the UK to lead and win in this hydrogen economy, but it's going to require, we're just seeing what it's going to require in order for us to get there. We're going to have more ambition and be more ambitious even than we just heard from Germany. But the prize here is real. It's economic growth and it's job security. For regions right across the UK. So there's a real prize for us to go for here if we can remove the barriers and if we can be more ambitious.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was talked about also in the previous panel. There has to be a symbiosis of a lot of, on the supply and on the demand side. And I know that we had that discussion yesterday, that unless we do that at the same time, we're not stimulating the growth and the usage of hydrogen sufficiently. But we do need investment, and investment in a form that stimulates the right sides, or on both sides at the same time. Have we got other questions from the floor? Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for some great talks. I really like David's clarity there, and I totally agree. I think it's spot on, and especially the sort of top-down piece. I guess there is a part that sits alongside that about easy wins. So if you approach this almost as guerrilla warfare, what are the things that organisations can do today, like Cadent, some of the German policy would be really interested in? What are the sort of guerrilla tactics that get this out of the blocks really quickly?
There another question, or do we pick this one up? I think this would be one. Do you want to start on this one, Markus?
Sure. So for us, a key factor was that we got the framework right also on the European Union level, because these projects of common European interest, as I mentioned, they exist only in the European framework. So we had to have that. And this sort of, in our view, allows us to be really ambitious in these projects. It requires money from the government, as well as sort of a determination, and that's the positive sign that I mentioned earlier, that we see so much positive response from research and industry, because to be frank, for Germany, it's also one question of, can we remain a manufacturing hub that we are now, and we feel that we need hydrogen for that to be on the same scale and sort of the same kind of hub and production system that we have now in 20 years. And hydrogen, in our view, is key to that. But we saw so much positive response from the various stakeholders that we're actually feeling that this can be done. Yeah.
Easy wins. Michaela, you talked to us already about some of them. Do you want to elaborate more?
Yeah, I think in the UK it would be great if the UK recognised some of its own value. So there's an awful lot of value in the UK in terms of the technology and in terms of deploying low carbon tech that can be deployed really quickly. And we had one example with the HS2 project. So we put the first fuel cell on the HS2 project. It's the largest infrastructure project in Europe. It's still using diesel. The Commonwealth Games next year, still using diesel in remote applications. This could be quite quickly changed to fuel cells and hydrogen. And it really, I think I've explained in the talk that it's already commercial in many of those applications. So I think it is recognition of those values, the homegrown values, and then also deploying those at scale with public funding.
David, what are your thoughts on easy wins?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And just hearing Michaela talk about the fact that we're still using diesel generators on sites, whether it's at the Commonwealth Games or just beyond, I mean, that feels like a real quick win. And some of the technology that Michaela's been speaking about there, that feels like a really powerful and easy quick win, which people should be exploring today. Other areas which I note down, I would say areas where you've got higher carbon costs to abate. So for example, industrial processes, that's a key one as well. But I'd also point to fleet. So right now, people can be using, could be exploring hydrogen for their fleet, and also for sort of like material handling transports as well. So like if we've been speaking to logistics companies about the sheer number of forklift trucks that exist in depots around the UK, for example, and electricity batteries don't really work too well with those machines, and hydrogen's got a real use case there today, for example. But also cities, we're working with them around how you decarbonise their fleet of buses, for example, and also some earlier applications there for heat. From a government point of view as well, I'd also say that there are some easy quick wins. So there's opportunities for government and also manufacturers actually to start putting hydrogen ready appliances out there. The technology exists, it's ready to be scaled as far as my understanding, and we could just start selling those to consumers. I also think there's opportunities, for example, I've already spoken about blending and the opportunities that can have to work with minimal / no disruption for consumers, plus also just the opportunity to introduce more ambition, higher targets, and then use that to unlock some of the progress that we need.
Yeah, on the previous panel, Alex was saying that the green hydrogen might be better used for the hard to decarbonize industries to start with. And I was just wondering whether in terms of quick wins, and not necessarily, these are necessarily quick, but in terms of addressing the real big polluters that have no alternative but to use hydrogen, should we not prioritize this in our use of hydrogen, and therefore channeling the production of hydrogen towards these areas where nothing else will work? Markus?
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. It was, in a way, what we felt was necessary, at least sort of when it comes to where the government actually has a role and should push. There's a lot of research going into the steel production, into chemicals, also a bit further down the road, air transport, but also maritime transport, of course, where we see that it's very hard to decarbonize in any other way, at least as we see now. So this is why we sort of focus a lot on industry and transport in the strategy.
Yeah, David, do you want to comment? Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'd agree with everything that's just been said there. I mean, and also the prioritisation, that's kind of what's happening. So industrial clusters around the UK, the infrastructure is going in there now to both produce the hydrogen, to then move it around and then use it to abate sectors such as steel. There are plans, for example, including shipping, which has just been mentioned there. And these are very difficult and costly areas of carbon emissions to abate. And so hydrogen is being targeted at those. I do think that we need to pause, however, and say that in order to get to net zero, we are going to need to see hydrogen play a role in all these sectors. And so looking forward, although the focus is on things like industry for the 2020s, looking forward into the 2030s, etc., we do also need to be thinking about how we're going to produce sufficient amounts of hydrogen so that we can also ensure that it's playing a role in decarbonising homes and businesses across the UK as well.
Okay, I'm conscious we're running out of time. Michaela, a final comment on that?
Yes. For me, the scale of the demand is just very intimidating. It's huge. I mean, if you think about the shift that's going to happen, it's very difficult to prioritise one space and another. So I think that actually hydrocarbons and biofuels will have a role in the shorter term, and we need to sort of recognise that. But we will move, and the faster this is invested in, and the faster the technologies are developed in parallel to the capacity to generate hydrogen, the quicker this will happen. So yeah, that will accelerate, I believe.
Well, I'd like to thank our panelists, Michaela, Markus, and David, for a very interesting discussion, and hopefully we will continue this conversation throughout the day. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.